this is Adrian Alex Poe. Welcome back to How to Properly Format a Screenplay. In this video, we're going to talk about character's first appearance, character's name, and the character dialogue. So let's start with when a character first appears. After you have the scene heading, you have the scene description, and then you can include describing how the character looks like, and you can include the action of the character, what he's doing before you get to the actual dialogue. So where to put it on the page margins and spacing, it's 1.5 inches or 15 spaces from the left edge and no further than 7.5 inches wide. So that's the range where you can put all the character description and appearance, and it's basically like the scene, the narrative description or scene description. If you're using a screenplay program, all the margin spacing will be automatically set, so you don't have to worry about the actual spacing. But if you're using Word where you have to manually type in the spacing and margins, then this will help. So what do you do when a character first appears? It's description of the character. You just describe what he's doing, and when he first appears, his name must be all in caps. So when he appears in the story or on the screen, all in caps. But then when he appears the second time on the screen or in the story, you just capitalize the first letter of the word like you would write your name, if it's the second time. And don't cap the name, don't cap all the name when a character is mentioned for the first time in a speech. So if you have some dialogue going on and he's like, oh yeah, my friend Bill is coming over later, and that's the first time he mentions Bill, but Bill doesn't actually show up in the scene, and he's going to appear later, then you don't capitalize all the name when you say the name Bill, just the first letter. And so here's a couple of examples. Emil McGilvray, first time he appears, so it's all in caps, and then this is where you can have a sentence or maybe two to describe how he looks like. So Emil, mid-30s, and then you get into the character action, like what is he doing in the scene. You can add a little bit more than that to add to the personality of the character, or to add to the look of the character. You could say Emil, possibly, he's a cowboy, mid-30s cowboy, or he has a scar across his face, or he's burly, he's real tall, stuff like that. So then you talk about what he's doing in the scene. He is deep in thought as he lights a cigar and scans the field with his eyes. There you go. Then another character appears for the first time. Suddenly, Jerry Joseph, all in caps, an elderly night watchman. See? So they let you know this guy's old. He's a night watchman. You can add other things like, oh, he's overweight, belly hanging over his belt. He has a limp, perhaps. Maybe he has a lazy eye to help with the character in the story. And then you say, what's he doing? He approaches, shines the flashlight in Emil's face. There you go. Another example of when you first, character first appears. Anthony, Canadian, Italian, story specialist extraordinaire, 30s, and not getting any younger, ambles over. So there you go. Like, he described a little bit more of who Anthony is. He's an Italian, Canadian, story specialist extraordinaire, blah, blah, blah. 30s. Okay, he's in his 30s. And there you go. Another example on the bottom. Jason Spencer, 21 years old, starstruck, Hoosier, bounds up to the security guard. There's another guy that appeared for the first time in the story. Security guard. Doesn't have to have a name, but you know what he is, a security guard, and he appeared for the first time. He's in his 50s, stuffy and humorless. So there you go. Perfect example of when the character first appears, all caps. You describe a little bit of how he looks like. You can throw in his age, and then you can start describing the action of what he is doing. So now let's talk about the character name. After you introduce the character for the first time, after you say what he's doing, the action, describing the action, now you're ready for him to talk. Now, what you do is when you put the name, where you place it is 3.5 inches, 22 spaces from the left margin to no further than 5.5 inches on the page. So whenever you're doing a set of dialogue, the name must always be capitalized. You place it's a single space under the scene description, and then comes the dialogue underneath the name. But in this case, when you're in the dialogue section or in the dialogue phase, then they always must be capitalized, the name, even if he appears a second time, a third time, a fourth time, it doesn't matter. Always the whole name in caps. And don't capitalize a group of people, just an individual. Here's a perfect example. Vito Corleone or Corleone, and then he says whatever he says, and then he goes to the next character that he's talking to, Johnny, and then the dialogue goes back and forth. I'm just showing you that no matter what happens, when you have two characters or however many characters talking with the dialogue, the names are capitalized always. So there's one more thing I want to touch on when it comes to characters' first appearance. So when a character who is identified only by a function or a characteristic, like Burly Man, Dancer Number 1, or Mutant, first appears on screen in the scene, then it must be all in caps. So basically, and also when mentioned again after his first appearance, you don't have to capitalize all the name, just the first letter. It's the same rules for characters who first appear with names, like if Bob appears, if Jenny appears for the first time, these rules apply. Same if they don't have a name. So you can see an example on the right. A receptionist sits behind the front desk. Now, this is the first time a receptionist appears. You don't know her name, but it's all in caps. The next time the receptionist appears, it doesn't have to be all in caps, just the first letter. Also, with the astronaut-like figure, you don't know, maybe it's a mystery man in the suit. You don't know. You don't have to give him a name. Next time he appears, you don't have to capitalize all the letters, just the first one. So, let me also mention this. If a character speaks off screen before we see them, then use male or female, depending on what they are, or function or characteristic, followed by, in parentheses, abbreviation O period S period, all in caps, which means off screen. So if you're introducing a character but he's off screen, you don't know who they are at first, and then they eventually step into the scene. They step into the scene and on screen. Then you can, call them by their name, all in caps. If you don't want to give them a name, you can keep them as Burly Man or Dancer Number 1 or Waitress or Lawyer or Officer. And, same rules apply. But once they're off screen, this is how you correctly, format it. So once the character appears on screen, then you can refer to them by their name. But again, you don't have to give them a name. And then the second time they appear, you don't have to, capitalize it all. So here's an example. The jingling of keys and footsteps can be heard approaching the bench. Suddenly a flashlight shines on Frank's face. He holds his hand to his eyes to block the light and see where it's coming from. And then you see the policeman off screen, because he's in the shadows. He's pointing the flashlight, blinding this poor guy, Frank. So, you don't see him. And then you can have him talk. So he's talking off screen. Can't sleep here, buddy. Get a move on and take your junk with you. Now, if you have him step out of the shadow and onto the screen, you don't have to give him a name. You can keep him as policeman. He might be an anonymous policeman that Frank does not know. He never met before. But once he first appears, you have to put him in capitalized in the description, all capitalize his name when he first appears. Next time he appears again, maybe later in the movie, the policeman, follows Frank and he's giving him a hard time and he's the same policeman. You don't have to capitalize him again, but you don't have to give him a name. Now let's say the second option, he steps out of the shadows and Frank identifies him. And he's like, "Hey, Officer John, what's going on?" Now, because Officer John now has a name, he appeared for the first time, you must capitalize his name. Next, later in the scene, that Officer John appears again, talking to Frank or whatever, you don't have to capitalize all his name, like all of the letters, just the first letter. So hopefully, I explained this good, and this really helps. And finally, let's talk about character dialogue. Now, this is just a format. I'm not going to get into, the creative aspect of how to write great dialogue. That's a whole different video, long time from now. So, where do you actually put the dialogue? It's 25 spaces or 2.5 inches, 10 spaces from the left margin. So the range is between like 25 spaces. Again, if you have a screenplay format, everything will be spaced in correct margins. So, I'm just giving you a heads up. So, the dialogue, what is it? It's a monologue, meaning one person, or a conversation, meaning between, two people or more. A monologue or a conversation meant to further the story or move the plot forward. Characters' names always appears above their dialogue and not spaced. So if a character, and also, if you're, like I mentioned earlier, if you're in the process of doing a dialogue or a conversation, every character that is talking to each other, always in caps, no matter what, doesn't matter how many first time, second time, third time they appeared on screen, when they're talking in a conversation, always capitalize all the characters' names. So, if a character speaks before we see them off screen again, then we can use male or female or function or characteristic followed by the word voice in all caps. So here's an example, depending on who's talking or who's calling out to someone, you use male voice, female voice, but that's about it. You don't do like waitress voice. No. If you do like a waitress is off screen, then you follow the rules of the formatting of a character being introduced off screen and how you bring them into the scene that we talked about. But you don't say like, astronaut voice or, waitress voice, receptionist voice. You do not do that. You only, if there's a male or female off screen, you go male voice or female voice. Now, once the character appears on screen, then you refer to them by their name if you choose, or you can keep them as receptionist or waitress or lawyer or whatever. And the same rules apply if they appear again. You don't capitalize all the letters, just the first letter of their name. So let me give you a couple examples. Starting with the top, you just got, two characters talking amongst each other, Anthony, and then you introduce for the first time writing enthusiast, 45, reads the first page of the Avatar reads the first page of The Aviator by John Logan. So he appeared for the first time all in caps. They described how he looks like a little bit. Okay, he's 45. You could add some other stuff depending on what he looks like. Then he describes what he is doing in the scene, but you don't give him a name. Okay? You don't have to give him a name. So they keep them, the dialogue continues between them as Anthony all in caps and an enthusiast all in caps. You don't have to give him a name. Another example, Jason is talking to the security guard. You don't know his name, but it's all in caps because they're having a conversation. Then you can have, if the security guard, you want to give him a name later, he finds out, oh, by the way, my name is, Tommy, the security guard. Okay. Well, then you, from now on, when they're having a conversation, Jason, all in caps, is talking to Tommy, all in caps. Or Tommy, the security guard, all in caps. Okay? That's when they're talking to each other. Another example, introducing a character. He goes, here comes young Antag's drunken father. So drunken father, introduced for the first time all in caps, and then he's starting to talk to young Antag. So see how in the character description, young Antags is not all in caps because he hasn't appeared for the first time. But when he is having a conversation with somebody else, his name, all of it, is all in caps. Young Antag, all in caps. You see what I'm saying now? It's very easy. Now, I'm probably confusing you, over elaborating, but I'm just trying to get the point across. So then they're having a conversation, drunken father. Yes, he was introduced for the first time, all in caps, but because he's talking in conversation, he remains all in caps. But then the next time he is brought up in a, character description, you don't have to capitalize drunken father, all in caps. Just the first letter. So then they continue talking amongst each other, all in caps. Now, let's talk about the male voice and female voice. I wrote a little something here. So they're off screen. You don't see the, person speaking. You don't see them on screen. So, but it's a woman. So you say female voice, all in caps. And she's talking. I want to tell you, whatever. Then you go to character description. Ed parts the curtain. So she's behind a curtain. Maybe they're at a theater, movie theater, I don't know. Could be anything. Ed parts the curtain and sees Bambi. Now that's the first time this female voice appeared on screen. So this character has a name. Again, all in caps, but if you wanted to, you could have just said Usher. Maybe they're at a movie theater, and instead of giving her a name, she's a female. But once she appears on screen, you could just say Usher. Female Usher. If you want. You don't have to give her a name. And then they describe how she looks like a little bit, a 20-something bombshell. So she is young, she is gorgeous, with hair tumbling everywhere, with long, beautiful hair. See what I'm saying? Then you can describe what she's doing in the scene. I don't know. She's asking for, Ed's ticket. She holds out her hand. And, or she pushes him. Who knows? She goes to kiss him. I don't know. Then Bambi talks. So see, you went from female voice off screen, all in caps. Now you have a name. So from that moment on, when they are talking, her name is all in caps. But then, for example, she says, how much I want you, whatever, to Ed. She's telling Ed how much I want you. But see, the next time we are in the character description, Bambi leaps into his arms and attacks his face with kisses. Now see, Bambi already appeared a sentence before when Ed parted the curtain, all in caps. But she just appeared again after she spoke. So you don't have to put it all in caps, just the first letter. See? Perfect example. Hope everything, that I talked about helps you. That's all, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, share this video, comment down below. Hit me up on Facebook and Twitter. Please subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel because I'm trying to get this movement started where story comes first. Hit the notification bell. We have a lot of videos coming out. I'm looking forward to them. Hope you're looking forward to them. And until next time, thank you so much.